Greetings, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. In my career, from the battlefield to Congress, honor and integrity have always been my compass. When it comes to building a precious metals portfolio for my family, I choose United Patriot Corp. Their commitment to honesty and transparency aligns with everything I stand for. They care about our great country and focus on serving patriots from all walks of life. They've teamed up with veterans of the precious metals market to create a new kind of gold dealer designed to serve the needs of a new type of gold buyer. And that's why I know I can trust them when it comes time to buy my gold and silver. If you value honesty and reliability as I do, then join me. Hey folks, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here. Welcome back to the Steadfast and Loyal program, segment 3 of this episode. We're talking about the next 48 hours, not the Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte movie, but the next 48 hours before Election Day, November the 5th of 2024. Critical election cycle for the United States of America. Critical election cycle, I would say, for the entire world. When you think about the things that have happened in the last 3.5, 4 years. And there can be nothing more important than the sovereignty of the United States of America. As a matter of fact, you've heard me say this, and I'll repeat it again because I think some of y'all probably need to just take the time and maybe read over the Constitution, if you can, the next 48 hours. Doesn't take long. But Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, known as the Guarantee Clause, two things that the Guarantee Clause says, that the federal government, the United States, that means the federal government, is supposed to guarantee to every state in this union, number one, a Republican form of government, not Republican Party, Republican form of government, because we're a constitutional republic. That means respect, honor, regard to the rule of law and individual rights, freedoms, and liberties. The second thing that the federal government, the United States, is supposed to provide, guarantee to every state in the union, is to protect them from invasion. And when the federal government fails to do so, Article 1, Section 10, Clause number 3 of the United States Constitution says that says exactly what states can do if actually invaded when there is imminent danger without any admit of delay. So why has it been that this Biden-Harris administration, first and foremost, in the first 100 days, enacted some 91 to 93 executive actions to undermine the sovereignty of the United States of America, create an open border situation? Now, I know some of y'all say, yeah, but Colonel, there's that piece of legislation. That piece of legislation had nothing to do with rectifying the situation of the border that Vice President Harris keeps talking about. As a matter of fact, that piece of legislation says that we would allow 5,000 people to continue to come across the border every single day. Now, how are you going to control 5,000 people? Is someone going to be down there with a counter thing, click, 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 and all of a sudden, when they get to 5,000, we say, stop. You guys just wait. Get in line, because we're going to start over tomorrow. Now, do the math. 5,000 times 365. That's not fixing our sovereignty issue. And oh, by the way, we do also have a little problem on the northern border, but it's more exacerbated along the southern border. And again, Vice President Harris says she has no regrets. She was the one put in charge. She went to a port of entry in El Paso, not the border. She went down to the quote-unquote border in Arizona, I think 30 to 35 minutes. Boop, gone. Photo op. Nothing. So this was intentional. This was purposeful. This was a violation of an enumerated duty and responsibility to the federal government, to the Biden-Harris administration. But yet they have been impeding states that were trying to make sure that they did not allow illegal immigrants to come across. And then we find out that in a recent report about 2 or 3 weeks ago that came out on a Friday. You always got to, be suspect of things that come out on a Friday because that's when people really don't want you to read and know what's going on. 425,000 criminal illegal immigrants have been allowed to come into this country. Criminal record illegal immigrants allowed to come into this country. Of that number, some 30,000 murderers and rapists in the United States of America allowed to come into this country under the Biden-Harris administration, of which Kamala Harris says, I have no regrets. Now, it's so funny now that in these final week or so, all the demonization and everything, Hitler fascists, wanting Hitler generals and everything. But if you listen to some of these recent interviews with the mainstream media, leftist media, alphabet soup media, and vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance, everything is about, you guys got a women problem. See, I don't think that Trump and Vance have a women problem. They have a manufactured media women's problem. That's why you just see these incessant commercial ads that are about one thing. It's about abortion, which, again, the language of the left is abortion. In the military, you abort a mission. We're talking about dismembering babies in the womb up until the time of birth. And I understand the exemptions. But those things, I mean, we keep hearing, everything about rape and incest, blah, 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 life of the mother. That's really just like 3, maybe 4%. What we're talking about is this thing on demand. What we're talking about is people such as in California, some other states are saying that, young girls don't have to inform their parents. They can just go out and they can have this procedure done. And again, all the way up to the time of birth, that's infanticide. There are certain European countries that I think it's Germany and Italy, it's at 12 weeks. France and Spain are at 13 weeks or so. The worst are the United Kingdom, England, and the Netherlands. They're at 26 weeks. But what we're talking about is all the way up to birth. And so they have defined that as the women's problem. But see, I think the real women problem from this Biden-Harris administration that the left does not want to talk about, and I think you should consider, is when you have open borders, look at the incredible increase of sex trafficking in the United States of America. Now, yes, there are young boys that are being sex trafficked, but primarily it is young girls and women. And we know about the rapings of these young girls and women coming across that border. We know about the rape trees. You don't know what I'm talking about? Google it and look it up. But to me, that's a real violence against women. I've yet to hear Kamala Harris talk about how she turned her back on the women in Afghanistan. To me, that's an international, global women's issue. And I kind of spent 2.5 years of my life in Afghanistan. And I remember seeing those little girls go to school. I remember seeing, women in Kabul being able to go out and actually drive by themselves, have businesses, be a part of the government. All that got shut down when Kamala Harris, with Joe Biden, agreed to allow the Taliban to take back over that country. Something, again, she says she has no regrets about. See, to me, that's a women's problem. See, Kamala Harris just recently, came down to Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas is in the top 5 for sex trafficking in the United States of America. Dallas is also a city that's in the top 5 for sex trafficking in the United States of America. She didn't say a peep about that. Bonce, she didn't say a peep about that. I'm a mother. Okay. If you're a mother, aren't you concerned about sex trafficking? No, I'm not concerned about that because, that would mean that I'd have to tell the truth and I would not be able to support this candidate. She was in Houston, Texas. And in Houston, Texas, Jocelyn Nungare, a 12-year-old girl, was brutally raped by 2 members of the Venezuelan criminal gang Tren de Aragua and then killed, left under a bridge by one of the bayous down there in Houston, Texas. Do you think that Kamala Harris, when she came to visit Houston, Texas, and she has Willie Nelson on stage with her, Beyonce, all of these star-studded people, do you think she took time to go see the family of Jocelyn Nungare? No. See, that's the real women problem. Has she gone to visit the family of Laken Riley? I know that she's been in Georgia for several different rallies. No. Has she gone over to visit the family of the 37-year-old mother of 5 in Maryland that was raped and killed by illegal immigrants? No. And, be pretty easy to drive over. Or take a helicopter from the vice presidential residence there in Washington, D.C. All of these women that have been victims of the crime, the criminals that she has allowed into the country, that's the real women's problem. Trinidad, right here in Dallas, 2-3 weeks ago, in an upscale neighborhood in Dallas. They abducted a woman, dragged her into her own home, tied her up, threatened her with cutting off her fingers, beat her, and then robbed her in her own home. They were picked up, arrested, 4 of them, all Trinidad members, this Venezuelan gang that has taken over apartment buildings. Now we have, gang wars between Trinidad and American gangs in Southside Chicago. That's the real women's problem. Why? Because Trinidad, what did they specialize in? Sex trafficking of young girls and women. Not a peep. Biden-Harris administration. Hundreds of thousands of children missing. Gone in 3.5 years. Women's problem? 250,000 Americans dead in 3.5 years from fentanyl poisoning. How many mothers out there have had to bury a son and daughter because of Vice President Harris having no regrets about the intentionality and the purposeful endeavor to undermine the sovereignty of the United States of America and the security of our border, which is the violation of the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4. But yet you won't hear anybody in the alphabet soup mafia media talking about the real women's issues. Or how about women who want to see a better educational opportunity for their kids by way of educational freedom? It was the Biden-Harris administration, their FBI, that designated mothers as domestic terrorists. So in these final 48 hours, when you get ready to head to the Election Day poll, think about the border and think about who really cares about your safety and security every day when you walk in the streets here in the United States of America. Because 425,000 criminal, illegal immigrants, I'm not just talking about the 1.5 to 2 million gotaways that we don't even know about, but 425,000, that's more than the active duty strength of your United States Army, or just about parity. But it's definitely more than the active duty strength of the United States Marine Corps. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, Steadfast and Loyal Program. We'll be right back. Hey, greetings, everyone. Colonel Allen West here, Steadfast and Loyal Program. This is last segment of this episode, 48 hours before America makes a huge decision as to the future and legacy of this constitutional republic. And I think that as you get ready, if you have not already voted, early voting here in the state of Texas has ended. If you have not already voted, you got to look at this thing not about personalities, not about personas. You got to look at this thing and understand what is the right and true relationship between the individual citizen and the government. I mean, I don't want to be told what I can eat. I don't want to be told what type of car I have to drive. I don't want to be told what type of appliances I have to have in my own home that, based upon property taxes, I don't even own. I don't want to be told what type of house I can build. And as a matter of fact, when I think about some of these things, I mean, my oldest daughter and her husband would love to be able to move out of their starter home into their next home with our little young grandson, Levi Allen. who turned a year old in October the 12th. Let me tell you about Levi Allen, just going back and talking about that life issue. Our daughter Aubrey suffered from gestational hypertension. You know, these things, threat to the life of the mother. But she is a physician assistant in the neonatology profession. So she works with preemie babies. And she gave birth to Levi Allen early, 29 weeks. Now, there's some people that believe that Levi Allen should be dismembered in the womb at 29 weeks. He was born at 3 pounds, 2 ounces. I can't tell you how much I cried, especially the first time I reached in and put my little index finger into his tiny little hand. And I prayed to God to allow that little boy to grow up, to give him this shot, to be a citizen in the greatest country, in the greatest state that the world has ever known. Today, Levi Allen, 3 pounds, 2.5 ounces. He's almost 23 pounds. Healthy, adorable, beautiful kid. Why aren't we talking about life instead of death? Why aren't we talking about the real search for cures for women's reproductive health? Because the other side, when they say that, they just are talking about dismembering babies in the womb. Real women's reproductive health would mean that we find cures for ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancers, fibroids, gestational hypertension, gestational diabetes. Making sure that everyone can have that access so that they can have good quality health care. And making sure that women and men in the United States of America lead healthy lives. I mean, I kind of like this Make America Healthy Again approach, because we're not healthy. And that affects so many aspects of our lives. But here is that little young family that would love to be able to go into their next generation home, give, little Levi Allen a little bit more space to run around, because he's learned how to walk now. That boy, he's going to be a hellion. But they can't afford it because of the interest rates. The interest rates that preclude them from going out and getting that new home, the interest rates that preclude them from going out and getting a new car, because we have a failed economy. And really and truthfully, we have an artificial economy. If it weren't for printing money and manipulating interest rates, which is what the Federal Reserve is doing, because of the failed economic policies of the past 3.5 years. And I continue to hear everybody talk about, well, inflation is going down. Well, I guess so. When you come into office, Biden-Harris administration, and the inflation rate is 1.4%, the GDP growth rate is 6%, and you take inflation from 1.4% up to an all-time astronomical high of 9.1%. Why? It has nothing to do with price gouging. You have to be a mindless lemming. You have to be totally stuck on stupid to believe that excuse. That all of a sudden grocery stores are going to jack up prices on eggs. Just out of clear blue. No. Because this Biden-Harris administration took us from being energy independent to being a net exporter of our energy resources. Right here in Texas, Port Arthur, Texas was the #1 exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world. But when you put your foot not on the energy exporting opportunities of Iran, as we saw, to bankrupt them so they couldn't finance terrorism, but you put it on your own domestic energy production. And I know people say, well, energy production is at an all-time high in the United States of America. Then why are we going to Saudi Arabia to beg? Biden-Harris administration did. Why are we going to Venezuela to beg? A dictatorship. And their oil is much dirtier. Why are we selling off our strategic petroleum reserve to our #1 geopolitical foe, China? So none of that makes sense. And if we were at that point where we were energy independent, then tell me, how is it that gasoline prices have shot up so high? You know that. Everybody knows that. Grocery prices. And the reason why grocery prices and commodity prices have shot up so high is because the cost of transportation, the movement of goods and services, has increased because of this administration. The green energy policies. Hey, look, you want an electric vehicle? Knock yourself out. Don't tell me I have to have an electric vehicle. And furthermore, we don't have the infrastructure. Remember Gavin Newsom out there in California? He actually told people, if you have an electric vehicle, stop driving it, don't plug it in because you're overloading our system. We're not there yet. And I'll tell you that I still haven't forgotten that freeze that we experienced here in the state of Texas, about 4 years ago now, winter. The Arctic blast, whatever they want to call it. But it was all because the wind and solar failed out here in Texas. The snow and ice covered up the solar panels. They froze up the wind turbines. And oh, by the way, when you talk about a lot of this stuff, it comes from China. You talk about, EV batteries, they come from China. When you have people that want to, all of a sudden our military needs to go to electric vehicles. I don't want a tank that is, using batteries from China. Do you know how insidious that is? But all of these things, all of these policies of the Biden-Harris administration, for which Kamala Harris says she has no regrets, they have led to a catastrophic economic situation. Cannot be debated. Come on. And it's not about price gouging. It's about driving up the prices of the movement of goods and services and commodities. It's about a year-over-year inflation rate that is 20% or even higher. It's about, a debt to GDP ratio that is redlining. Well, they've created a lot of jobs. 818,000 jobs that the quote-unquote Biden-Harris administration created had to be wiped off because they didn't exist. Don't believe me? Go check the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And when you really peel the onion back on a lot of these jobs in the Biden-Harris administration, first of all, a lot of them are recovered jobs. But the other thing is that we've seen an increase in government jobs, government sector jobs. Who's paying for those? So think about these things when you're going in these final 48 hours. And the last thing I want to share with you, our domestic security is horrible. The level of crime, it is up. And even now the FBI has come back and revised their numbers. If you really want to know where we are, I think it's the Crime Prevention Research Policy Center. They will tell you what's going on with crime in the United States of America. And when we have these activist judges and these activist district attorneys, who many of them were supported financially by George Soros and his Open Whatever Foundation, they're releasing violent criminals back out on the streets on top of the criminal illegal immigrants that we have, the single military age males that we have all over this country. And yet through this all, we want to defund police. We want to reimagine ICE, the Immigration Control and Enforcement Agency. We want to tell you, the legal law-abiding citizen, that you cannot have your Second Amendment right to be able to protect yourself. Why would you vote against your own security? That's really what this comes down to in these last 48 hours. You really want to vote against your own economic security. You want to vote against your own energy security. You want to vote against your own national security. You want to vote against your own border security. You want to vote against your own domestic security. You want to vote against your own foreign policy, which leads to a good, strong national security. You want to vote against your own educational security, your ability to be able to go out there and do what is right for the education of your child. Oh, that's right. Kamala Harris says that they're not your child. The child belongs to all of us. Not last time I checked Proverbs 22:6, ma'am, says train up a child in the way they should go so that when they grow old they shall not depart from it. It doesn't say government train up your child. It's referring to me, mommy and daddy, or grandpa, grandparents. Not y'all. But that's what the progressive, socialist, leftist, Marxist, statist, communist mentality has always been. It has always been that you don't own anything. You don't own your life. You don't own your liberty. You don't own your property. You don't own your children. You don't own any rights to your security. That is what's on the ballot in 48 hours. Will you make a decision to be steadfast and loyal? Or will you make a decision to be a serf? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, and we choose to be steadfast and loyal.
Before they burn it down.